It's hard to overstate how important the Corolla badge is to Toyota. There's already a hatchback, a saloon, an estate, and now an SUV. This is the new Toyota Corolla Cross. It sits above the CHR and below the RAV4 in the lineup, and well, it's one of the best-selling segments in the country. In design terms, the Corolla Cross is perhaps more restrained looking than the CHR, less dramatic, but we think it's going to have more universal appeal because of that. It's still very much an SUV in appearance. You've got roof rails, you've got black cladding on the sides, and it's not unattractive. The sport model rides on these quite nice looking 18-inch alloy wheels, and the headlights are also very technical looking. The lineup is really quite simple. There are hybrid powertrains only. Buyers can choose from 1.8 litre or 2 litre, and they're two quite different powertrains. I'll talk a little bit more about those in a moment. Most models are front-wheel drive only, but there are four-wheel drive options in some markets. As you move to the rear, there are a few other details to look at. You've got Corolla Cross embossed in a little chrome strip on the side here, and as it is an SUV, you've got black, rugged-looking bumpers. That upright exterior does mean the Corolla Cross holds considerably more than the CHR in the back. The boot holds 436 litres when the rear seats are in place. They do split and fold down, but as you can see, there's a bit of a step there. Thankfully, underneath the boot floor, there is a spare wheel actually, so I think Irish buyers are going to really appreciate that. It's worth reiterating that while the Corolla Cross holds more than the CHR in the boot, and it's bigger than the hatchback there too, the Corolla Estate holds considerably more again. So if boot space is your priority, that's the one to go for. I know I refer to the Corolla Cross as a restrained design, but its designers are proud of it, and if you look closely, there are even a few Easter eggs. When you sit into the rear of the Corolla Cross, you realise that there's plenty space back here for two adults, a third at a pinch. Probably just as crucially to family buyers, there are ISOFIX car seat locations on the outer two seats. And even in a bobbleheaded hat, there's loads of headroom in here. Buyers that have checked out the Toyota CHR and been put off by how dark the rear of that car feels will really like this. The windows are much larger, the doors are lower, there's a better view out in all seats, and that means kids won't ever feel car sick, they'll feel like they're enjoying the journey a bit more. In this mid-level model here, we still have air vents in the middle, and there are two USB-C ports. In the armrest, if you're not using the centre seat, there are two decent cup holders as well. Speaking of cup holders, there are these excellent high-level cup holders on the doors on the sides. Up front, the first thing you notice is the amount of space you have. It feels more spacious than a Corolla hatchback, for instance. And visibility is also better. So you've got this big front window, got particularly large door mirrors, which gives you a great view out the side. And yet, over your shoulder, the view is also good, so there are no blind spots. It's clearly not as dramatic looking inside as the Toyota CHR, but it's just as well put together. So it's quite tactile, the materials are hard in places but also hard wearing, and I think that's probably a key thing. Toyota buyers will appreciate that. Highlights include this new large touchscreen in the centre here. It's in your line of view, you don't have to take your eyes off the road too much to see it, and thankfully Toyota has also included physical controls for the heating and ventilation. That's complemented by a really sharp digital instrumentation screen in front of the driver. It's quite simply laid out and everything, but you appreciate how high definition it is when you go through the driving modes, etc. In terms of storage, this centre console is notably slim, probably to give the passengers a bit more space, but it still holds two decent cup holders here, and in front of the gear lever you have this flat area which holds any large smartphone. Above that is a USB-A port in this particular model, so that's useful for plugging in that phone. And behind, under your elbow, you have a storage box. There's a 12-volt power socket in there, and it's an okay size. You won't put laptops or handbags or anything into it. Complementing all that, there's a decent glove box there. Door pockets are, again, a bit slim to make more passenger space, but they hold big bottles. When Toyota launched the Corolla, it focused on a low seating position in a bid to make the car nicer to drive. It's the opposite in the Corolla Cross, of course. People who buy SUVs tend to like the higher driving position, and you can feel that straight away here. On top of that, there's great adjustment of that driving position. So you get a lot of adjustment to the seat, up and down, and the steering wheel goes in and out and up and down by quite a big margin. So most people will get comfortable fairly easily. Now, let's go see what it's like out on the road. As ever in a Toyota, you start off on electric power, and the response feels instantaneous because of that, because you're running on the electric motor. It isn't a plug-in hybrid, so it doesn't go very far on electric power, but you'd be surprised how often it dips in and out of that. As you can hear, when you accelerate a bit harder, the engine is more audible, but most of the time, at a cruise around town, it's silent effectively. The model we're driving has a 2-litre hybrid powertrain, and it has 197 horsepower it produces. so it's not slow by any measure. How that performance feels depends on which driving mode you're in. There are 3. It defaults to normal, of course, but then you can also choose the eco mode, so eke out as much mileage as you can from each tank of fuel. The sport mode is notably different from eco and normal modes in that response is instantaneous, the engine is a bit more audible, but it feels like you're getting that full 197 horsepower. It's quite a quick car in that mode actually. But nobody's saying that the Corolla Cross is a sporty car. It's just not what it's about. Impressively, it holds the road very well. It feels controlled, and yet it does that without discomfort to the passengers. So it's actually a little bit more comfortable than the regular Corolla, and it's almost as good to drive, almost as agile, almost as composed. I think special mention should go to the damping of the car. It just controls the car over bumps very, very well, and composed, it's stable. On the motorway it's relatively quiet, there's not too much wind noise and road noise, and it feels like a car you can spend a lot of time in without getting tired, I guess. Now today we've put up a couple 100 kilometers on the clock, and very, very mixed driving. We had some motorway driving earlier, we had some bad traffic, so some stop-start traffic, and now we're up in the mountains. And during the whole day we've averaged 6.2 litres per 100 kilometers. So not quite as good perhaps as the best diesels, but it's pretty good for a car that is moving with the times. It emits very, very little when it's in town. It can run on electric power. As I mentioned earlier when I talked through the interior, you really notice when you're driving this car how good the visibility is. So big door mirrors, great over the shoulder view, big windows all around actually. Makes it a safer car as well as one that's more pleasant to be in. Speaking of safety, Toyota does deserve credit for loading the Corolla Cross with a huge amount of active safety equipment as part of the Toyota Safety Sense umbrella. It's very easy to criticise the Corolla Cross for not being interesting, not being dramatic. And let's face it, it isn't. However, it is a sensible SUV. It's got plenty of space. The hybrid powertrain is quite efficient and smooth, and it's a Toyota, so it's likely to be very reliable. We can't see any other way other than this being a massive sales success. If you'd like to know more about the Corolla Cross and all of its rivals, head on over to our website. It's CompleteCar.ie. It's linked from the description below. It's a great resource for helping you find your next new car.